Calling all leaders, conversations with leaders for aspiring leaders. I am Brian Last, and joining me today, a person I'm all too excited to have here. And in the words of Chris Lewis himself, retired OPP commissioner, a complete badass, and I can second that notion as well. Monique Roland joins us today. She is retired inspector of the Sault Ste. Marie Police Service, as well as the vice president and director of training with Canadian Critical Incident Inc., and as well president of her own consulting firm. Certainly the list goes on. Monique, I thank you ever so kindly for graciously lending your time and being here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Brian. It's great to see you again.
Perfect. Excellent. And that being said, I believe where you and I first met was sort of inadvertently through speaking engagements, albeit sort of different times with the Ontario Special Constables Association. So it's always nice when schedules line up. We have the chance to sort of chat in this format here. So again, I appreciate you coming here. And obviously, much like, we've already sort of alluded to sort of the framework of the landscape, obviously with these conversations on this YouTube channel, all to do with the world of leadership. And certainly I can think of anyone who demonstrates and exudes leadership more than yourself. And certainly you're one of the first people that came to mind here. So maybe just to give a better sort of landscape for our conversation. Obviously, there's people watching sort of all over the world, may not be necessarily familiar with you and your tenure. So as far as your, I guess, sort of professional background or the succession of events to more or less bring you where you are present day, maybe you can give us just sort of a brief overview.
Sure. I retired 2 years ago after 32 years in policing. So I'm with one police service. So I retired at the rank of inspector, and I was really fortunate throughout my career to work in all different units. My background is mostly investigations, but we're a small, geographically isolated service, so you learn to wear a lot of hats, and I've worked in a lot of operational areas as well. And I have a passion towards some of the things that I'm currently instructing, things like crisis negotiator, incident command. But I was very fortunate to be involved in a lot of projects towards the end of my career and a lot of committees with Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police. So it was a great opportunity to be involved in a lot of projects and work with some phenomenal people.
Excellent. I can only well imagine. And you certainly used an interesting word that I sort of want to peel back the layers on a little bit more, the idea of crisis. And certainly there's a sentiment, the sign of a true leader will rise to the surface in the eye of a crisis, if I can word it that way. And I'm certainly, it goes without saying, you're obviously no stranger to that, being that you're sort of a go-to resource. So absolutely a subject matter I'm all too excited to chat with you about. So that being said, and again, you sort of preface that you ended your career at the rank, or with the Sault Ste. Marie Police Service, the rank of inspector. So maybe just to put this in civilianized terms, because again, it may not necessarily be that everyone watching here trying to learn about leadership is necessarily a police officer. So for lack of better description, perhaps this rank of, let's say, inspector, more in the realm of, let's say, a senior manager or director role, or for lack of better description in the policing world, the first of sort of the senior command positions, I guess you could say. Whereas, more the realm of middle management would be supervisor, staff sergeants, or sergeant, staff sergeant, sort of supervisor, manager. Would that be more or less the distinction that you would say, more or less?
Yeah, in my service, it depends on which service you come from, of course, the amount of ranks that they have. But that position is more divisional commander. So the rank above middle management, so you would supervise several units. When I was the inspector of investigations division, there were 10 units. So there would have been frontline supervisors, sergeants, and staff sergeants assigned to various units. So you really are that division head. And in smaller services, there's usually only 3 or 4 division heads that answer to that senior command, which would be the deputy and the chief. So yeah, so it's at that level, although you still have your hand in some management, because really the size dictates it. You are that overall division command.
Gotcha. Now, certainly being that, again, this rank of inspector, obviously a very high successive role, and certainly a congratulations that, you even endeavored to reach such role. But, I think it goes without saying that, as you start to climb up the rungs of the ladder, and I use that terminology a lot, to these higher ranks or successive roles, and again, maybe arguably so, and certainly I want to get your take on this, this world of leadership, or this skill, this entity that is leadership, presumably becomes more and more sort of, part of the equation, or brings itself sort of to the forefront or the surface. So I'm wondering if maybe there was one point or distinctive moment you can think of where you sort of took a step back and thought to yourself, hey, you know what, this world called leadership is going to be part of the equation, and I want to start to maybe pay more attention to this. And even to that effect, you know, we could certainly pose a question, really, what does leadership unto itself mean to you?
Well, twofold question. So I'll
Yeah,
start with what does leadership mean to me?
yeah.
Because, I've done a lot of writing and public speaking, and, I take a really, unbiased or a feminist leadership look often at that subject when I speak about it. But when I, internalize it and reflect about what it actually means to me, it really means leadership or being a leader. It means being given that responsibility, high level of responsibility to support others. So you're being given that responsibility to support others with empathy, compassion, and respect. And so it's not about power and it's not about personal position to me. It's about supporting others with those three things: empathy, compassion, and respect.
Interesting. And to that effect, it almost sort of resonates with me that there's a quote I like to sort of bring to the forefront a lot. And one of the best quotes I perhaps can utilize to describe leadership. So maybe you can give your insights on this. But there's sort of the sentiment that leadership, it's not about being in charge, but rather taking care of those in your charge. And it
Exactly.
almost sounds exactly what you were sort of speaking about there. So again, maybe still somewhat on the notion of leadership or leadership, I should say, and sort of the functions surrounding as one endeavors to climb up the ladder. I'm a little bit curious, to see if you maybe took notice to anything, and I would imagine there'd
Yeah,
be a few things. But as you start to go from, let's say, supervisor to manager, i.e., sergeant to staff sergeant, maybe the senior command role, were there
sure.
certain things you noticed that maybe you were doing more of, less of? Again, for people watching who are aspiring certainly to have more responsibility in the roles, things of that nature.
Oh, for sure, Brian. There's a few things that stand out in my mind when you start to realize what leadership really is, or where you're finding your role as a leader. So I was promoted to sergeant really early on in my career. And so I was very fortunate, at 8-year constable to be promoted to sergeant. And then I've always done so many varying roles. A lot of those roles, and for many years, my career landed me in investigations. So CID, Criminal Investigations Division. And so as a sergeant, and even as an acting staff sergeant and a staff sergeant for many years in CID, you work fairly autonomously. Or if you do work as a supervisor, you're leading small groups, right? Teams of like highly motivated people with similar goals that require very little supervision. So you're really not tested as a leader in those roles. And, that was sort of my experience. Then I was transferred temporarily to patrol. And so that was foreign to me because I spent so much time working in investigations and specialty units and, some street stuff, some drug stuff, certainly a lot of victim-centered work and investigations. And then I'm transferred to patrol to act as a staff sergeant on patrol to manage a platoon of frontline officers. So I'm going to say that that was probably pivotal in my development as a leader, because now you have to start recognizing the varied needs of a really large group of individuals. And where you were working with an autonomous team, they didn't have a lot of needs that were needed or required constant, addressing, I would say. And so now we've got diverse needs and some really labor intense human resource issue needs where I never had experienced that before. So then I started to realize that these individuals, who were having issues or behaviors or weren't as productive or not showing up for work or not acting as part of a team or not providing the service that the public deserved, had specific needs that required addressing, whether it be like simple to really complex human resource needs. And that's when you realized that tested me in my leadership ability. So it was that sort of moment where you realize this is a little bit more complex than what I had been used to.
I got you. And certainly to that effect, I mean, having your eyes open to the world of leadership, if I could sort of word it that way, and obviously being a recognized and perceived leader unto yourself as we're sitting here right now, I guess in the overall landscape, whether it be policing or otherwise, based on sort of your experience and what you've seen maybe for yourself, do you believe there is, sort of a lack of true leadership within our current landscape? So in other words, are leaders currently sort of managing people, being authoritarian, sort of that style? Or, are we doing a pretty good job? And, to that effect, if we're just merely managing people, do you think there's anything maybe we can do or be cognizant about to sort of turn our, perceived leaders into actual leaders that lead? And I see you smirking, so I'm sure you have a story,
No, I
to
have
share
thoughts.
here.
I
Yeah,
have thoughts because, I'm not going to say that the police culture is doing a bad job, but police culture is still bound by those traditional leadership models and focus on those strong authoritative leaders, like leaders as individuals, leaders that appreciate power and position. So reward those people, and those people are inclined to feel safe, right, amongst others that are just like them. So they find common characteristics with, people and surround themselves with those people. And so as a police culture, we're not doing as well as we should because we're still binding ourselves or pulling ourselves into these traditional leadership models and making ourselves feel comfortable by surrounding ourselves with those other leaders that appreciate those certain characteristics. So when you have leaders that are, leading with empathy and compassion and more, and willing to challenge bias and challenge the standard in policing culture, it's a little uncomfortable. So, and really, that's maybe where we should be going.
No,
Go ahead, Brian.
No, for certain. I guess little glitch. I wasn't sure if you were done your sentiment there. My apologies, but but I certainly wanted to jump in because again, I guess what I'm sort of wondering about, just based on what you've sort of shared with us right there, this idea of maybe the more autocratic style, my way or the highway, or again this idea of managing versus leading. I mean, what have you seen, or what are your takes on how this may affect sort of the environment or the work environment, morale and certainly the sentiment
Absolutely.
of growth or people just feeling, that I'm in a place where I can actually excel and work at my best. Do you think that certainly hinders that? Or?
Well, I can tell you what I know subordinates feel like they want. Like people want to come to work in a workplace and feel so, and it's their perception that matters. That's their manager, that their leader, that their command staff give a damn about them. And even in
Sure.
and so it's not about personal positioning and personal agendas and climbing that ladder, because when you see that, you start to lose respect and you lose hope that that person really has your best interests and not their own at heart. So if I felt confident that somebody was looking out for me, then I would be that much more productive and my morale would be that much more higher, because I know that if I had a concern or something was going wrong, somebody would be looking out for me. And so I think we fail as leaders when we don't communicate that or give people that voice all the time, or that consideration to, or ask them, what do you need to make your job easier? What can I do for you? Or how can I help you? And I've said that to folks that I thought were struggling a little bit. And they said, no one's ever asked me that before. Then I'm failing if no one's asked you before what it is that you need. And I'm not talking big things. I'm talking something as simple as, I'm really struggling getting to work for this specific shift because I'm a single parent and I have to get my kids to somewhere care. That's it. That's what your biggest struggle is. Why can't we work with you? And in return, that person's how they identify themselves and their self-worth and their respect for themselves and the organization, it just changes everything. And it really, how small. And so I think when these people see some leaders with their own agendas, their own personal power, and not having that relationship with them, I think that's when we're seeing some issues.
I got you. It's certainly what you're speaking about. Obviously, you're sort of resonating with, I guess, one of the more popularized, or certainly what suggested should be maybe one of the more popularized leadership styles. This servant leadership style, not
Yeah,
you work for me,
absolutely.
but more I work for you, and that's maybe
Absolutely.
arguably where we sort of fall short. The higher we get up the ladder, it's not
Yes.
I'm the boss, you do what I say. It's no, I'm here to take care of you, and every step down the ladder, so to speak. So,
Yeah.
absolutely a good point, and certainly an excellent takeaway. And to that effect, and I know you sort of preface this, but maybe to be even more obvious about it, I mean, this idea of morale and growth and everything that comes along with it. Do you think
Mhm.
that sort of solely rests on the shoulders of the leaders to create that such environment? Do you think it's twofold? What's sort of your take on that?
Oh, I absolutely think that we have a responsibility to the environment for everyone that we work with. If you can't call yourself a leader, you have some power and authority. Well, then use it wisely. So it's start by knowing yourself, of course, because we all have our own weaknesses, and we could hide behind this paramilitary hierarchy culture, but ultimately you have a high level of responsibility, and you're responsible to yourself first. You got to fill those gaps. And then you have to get to know your people and what motivates them, what are their needs, and how do you even know that unless you ask? How do you understand the needs of your organization unless they have a voice? And then do something. Like that's the next step. It's it's one thing to understand that morale is low, but what have you done about it? And who have you spoken to about it? And so care, give a care, give a damn, because it's almost as simple as asking your people what they value, not what they necessarily they need, but what they value. Because we know research is clear about it. Leadership, servant leadership, research is very clear. And members who feel cared about, valued, respected, empowered, so that what they know or what they want or what they think means something, they're going to report like higher leader competencies in their supervisors and their managers and their command staff than those that they see in constant competition for power, right? Because that's when you start losing respect. When you see command staff or managers that are constantly in competition for power, often at the expense of others, of course, what value do you see in that as a person? You feel like you are nothing. So it's just that whole change. I mean, I know we're social creatures, but we're going to react to that environment. And so if you felt valued and respected and empowered, you're going to uh, reflect that in the way you feel about your leaders.
Excellent. And it makes perfect sense. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're talking with someone who's sort of your leader, manager, supervisor, and you think whatever they're saying to you is just sort of self-serving, I mean, how good are you going to feel about yourself and your own pursuit? So obviously, certainly something to
Mhm.
be cautious about. But as well, and going a tiny bit off scripture, I mean, to the same sentiment, and this is maybe just for argument's sake, it could be that perceivable leader, let's say the sergeant or supervisor, maybe it's just a matter that sergeant or supervisor at that moment doesn't have clear vision of where they're going. Maybe they don't have the proper mentorship, and their
Yeah,
wheels are constantly turning, and they're maybe so concerned about where do I go next that they're not necessarily focusing their sights. So I think really what I'm trying to get at, it goes all the way up the chain and all the way
yeah.
down, so to speak. So absolutely an excellent point to take away. So this next question, and I prefaced it earlier on, and certainly something, as I mentioned, I'm definitely excited to talk to you about this. Obviously, being one of your fortes, but the world of certainly rising to the occasion in a crisis or emergent circumstances, and much like I've already said, certainly the sign of a true leader, or one of the signs of a true leader, being how they're going to navigate the landscape of a crisis. Obviously, you're no stranger to that. So I'm just wondering what lessons, and I'm certain there's many. We could probably fill like a week's worth of YouTube videos about that.
Yeah.
But maybe at a high level, just sort of overall, what you've sort of if there's any main sort of things that are always at the forefront of your mind when you talk about the idea of leading in a crisis, maybe you could sort of share at a high level with everyone watching.
Well, I think as leaders, we're completely fail if we turn it into why is this happening to me right away? Because how am I going to manage this? What am I going to do? That's going to expose those failed leaders. So a crisis is going to expose those folks in leadership roles who are as concerned about people as their own personal power and the impact on them within our organizations. So if you think about that, people if you're facing a crisis, your people want to know what's happening. How is this going to impact me? What's my tomorrow going to look like? Well, as a leader, you're feeling the same way, but you have to park that to the side and really focus on the concerns and the needs of your people and the people that they serve. So forget about your personal issues and your personal power within the organization and start focusing on building that community within your organization, building that relationship, and having them find that security and trust in you as a leader who listens to what they need, who gives them, even if you don't have the answers, at least tell people what you're doing. And we drop the ball as leaders because we don't explain often. You know, Friday afternoon, you get the new directive and everything's changed. Well, that just throws people into chaos, right? And add that on top to a crisis. So it's a matter of how you communicate and listening to those concerns and making those people feel a little bit more comfortable that if you're in charge, at least you've got a grip on things and you know that your communication is two ways with them. Does that make sense, Brian?
Well, of course, absolutely, and you know, to that effect, it might be something even as simple as you know, instead of thinking about what report do I have to write in regards to this, maybe the more important pressing matter is, hey, how are you? Are you okay? Can I, or, you know, sort of direct you to, you know, Mona Chappelle to get some counseling or whatever the case is. I mean, obviously, you again,
Right.
that idea of servant leadership, you're there to take care of the people in your charge. It's not about being in charge. You know,
Well,
so certainly you're there to take care of them, right?
we're in a crisis right now. And so even if you
Yep.
had to say to your people, look, everyone, we're going to have to move everybody around. And you're going to land in a job you've never done before, or you're going to be tasked with things that you've never done before. This is temporary. We'll support you as much as we can. You're going to find maybe yourself in a place that's going to make you feel uncomfortable or you don't have quite the training for. But you are telling them the truth.
Yep.
And, you know, we'll support you as best as we can through this. We're all in a crisis. Just knowing the bad thing that's going to happen to you almost is as comforting as
Well, no,
support.
and that's an excellent point. And again, I don't know what your experience has been with this. I can tell you, you know, certainly modestly for me, you know, in my tenure, as far as the front line talking about, you know, the higher ups, you know, one of the things that always comes about is the idea of communication. You know, why didn't I know about this
Absolutely.
beforehand, or
Yeah.
you know, give me the pros and cons. And again, you know, if someone knows both the pros and cons, much like you've alluded to, at least they know what to expect on both sides, and they sort of know what they're walking into, as opposed to this just got dumped to me and I have no idea what this is about, what it's
Yes.
representative of. So that's certainly an excellent point, and I think something that obviously we should all be more cognizant about for certain. So I'm glad you brought that up. Now that being said, and shifting gears a little bit, still on the topic of obviously taking care of those in our charge, or this idea of wanting to look out for the ones we're looking out for, if that makes any sense. But you know, there's also sort of a saying that leadership as well is about creating other leaders. You know, not about being the best, about making other people better. So I'm just wondering what your experience has been with, you know, any sort of maybe perceived threshold in this regard. In other words, you know, is there something we want to think about as to how far we want to let someone run ahead the herd? You know, because I'll tell you, for me, I've heard things, and I'll say this publicly because I'm not very shy about this. I've been told, hey, Brian, you shine too bright and you try too hard. Is there such a thing as shining too bright and trying too hard? And to Monique Rollin?
Absolutely not. In my mind, leadership isn't about creating other leaders. Okay.
Yeah.
It's about creating a barrier-free environment for those who strive to lead. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so it's not about creating leaders. It's about providing them no barriers or breaking down those barriers, making sure that they have fair and equitable opportunities for development, which often are not fair and equitable. We see people give opportunities to those people they like or people who are like them. Instead of giving fair and equitable opportunities. And it's also taking a look at internal systemic biases and making sure that those are challenged at every level so that those people who are striving to lead and learn and develop and, you know, create those opportunities, that we do that for them. And so if you have a shining star who wants to learn, is hungry to learn, who wants opportunities, then it's my job to remove those barriers and let them run with it.
Gotcha.
So my job to find those people who have internalized barriers, who need a little push, and create that opportunity for them as well.
Absolutely, it makes perfect sense. And just while we're sort of on this topic about bias and barriers and things of this nature, and again, you're going a tiny bit off script, but I would be hard pressed to not mention this. As I understand it, you were the first female ever to realize the role of inspector with your police service. So maybe you could just speak a little bit about how sort of momentous this that scenario was to you, really what that meant to you.
It meant a lot to me because I still see a systemic bias out there when it comes to promotional processes, specifically for gender. And I don't think that the people who are looking at those processes are looking at it through the same eyes as the people that it's affecting. And so I'm really a big, huge advocate when it comes to really challenging and examining what our promotional processes look like with regards to gender. I write on a lot, I speak on it a lot, and it's because there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. And unfortunately, the people who are making those decisions aren't able to have those experiences or look at it through the eyes of the people that are facing those barriers. So yeah, I'm very proud to have been made that rank, I guess, as the first female.
Excellent. And absolutely. I mean, that I guess not to go completely off course into a whole other subject matter, but obviously that very much in tune with the idea of perhaps implicit biases, whether we're aware of not, we all have it, but it's a matter just of sort of, I guess, flicking the on switch and being cognizant in your thinkings and things of that nature, maybe not being so much on autopilot and more sort of cognizant and in tune. And hopefully we're coming around and starting to do a little bit better on that as the topic comes more to the forefront. So we can only hope that that's the case. But with that being said, and again, I'm so very gracious for the time you spent with us today. Sort of the I guess be all and end all last question is always everyone's favorite. And I tell you, as soon as I put 3 chevrons on my shoulder, I started to hear this a lot more. The very question that I was always posing to people to even realize sort of where I'm at right now. But we all know there's sort of no magic pill or you need this designation versus that one or whatnot to try to strive for your furthering career pursuits, if I can word it that way. But as far as maybe insight or advice, whether it's programs or certifications or anything that maybe someone should be switched on to or cognizant about if they want to realize more successive roles or certainly embrace leadership, what's maybe your parting words on that in that regard?
I think we really need to start looking at ourselves. Like, we're very big in leadership world about pushing ourselves into self-belief. If you believe it, you can do it. Believe in yourself. There's don't doubt it, push yourself through. But I think it's maybe the opposite. I think we need to start knowing our own limitations and then challenge ourselves to fill those gaps. If you are not good at confronting someone and having those hard conversations, maybe you need to start challenging yourself to fill those gaps, because you're not going to be an effective supervisor or leader unless you start working through those areas that are uncomfortable for you. Because we live in that world that we celebrate self-belief, right? You believe it, you can do it, be confident. Well, I think it's probably more important to be self-aware. Know yourself, self-aware, and fill those gaps. Challenge yourselves to say, I really don't know enough about this, or I'm not really good at this. And then go out and educate yourself and find a mentor, talk to the people that you emulate that are good at that, and fill in those gaps, because there's a conflict between the two. Like, we should have awareness of our limitations, like flaws and weaknesses. They're not really compatible with these like high levels of self-belief. And the only reason to be like devoid of self-doubt and like insecurities, there's no way you can actually ever do that. So the way to fix that is to start doing the work, I guess, is my
So and it's interesting you bring that up. So as recent as I guess maybe about a month ago or something like that, a recruit class of officers I was training. I sort of brought the idea. I noticed that everyone was a little shy to ask questions. So certainly I believe one angle what you're talking about is this idea of embracing your vulnerabilities. And what I mean by that, I actually played a clip. There's a gentleman, Simon Sinek. He's a sort of a leadership guru I'm obsessed with. But he refers to himself as the idiot in the room. And I literally played this video, and it's this gentleman, Simon Sinek, you know, a guy who gets paid millions of dollars to go sit with the biggest CEOs and be the consultant. But he literally says, I'm okay, you know, perceiving myself as an idiot in the sense that I'm going to keep asking questions till I understand it. I have no idea what you're talking about. And all of a sudden, all the other big wigs in the room are almost like, yeah, you know what, you're right. I don't understand either. So there's certainly something to forget about ego, arrogance, and just, you know, endeavor to ask the questions. That's for one such example. So obviously, you know, an excellent point to end on there, and certainly I would imagine lots to take away from everyone in that regard.
I don't think we're ever the smartest. I said I'm the smartest person in the room unless I'm alone, Brian.
Yeah. fair
So, you know, and I think as leaders too, that we don't appreciate just because you have rank or experience or title doesn't make you the subject matter experts. And so I've learned my best lessons by seeking out subject matter experts and saying, tell me, explain to me, learn me what you do, because I'm making decisions for those people. And you think about critical incidents. Like, if I didn't have a working knowledge of everyone under my command, what is it their job does, then I'm failing them because I'm making decisions for them. So educate yourself and do the work, and then you'll become that much more confident. You'll be much, I guess, a more skilled leader. But I agree what you say. Ask questions, fill in the gaps.
Excellent. Well, I tell you what, again, I'm so very thankful for the time we spent here. Amazing insights, lots to take away for everyone. So, folks, Monique Rollin, we're so thankful to have her here. And for each and every one of you watching, we appreciate you tuning in every episode, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.